Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to It Is Easy, the first of 4 of our Spotty Rain series introducing librarians and library staff to our citizen science in the library efforts related to drought and precipitation monitoring. If you haven't already and you're on today, please let us know who you are and where you're from, and if you'd like to answer the question of what was the best program you ever hosted as you're logging on, that would be fun. I want to there we go. I want to introduce myself today. My name is Nicole Colston. I'm an assistant research professor here at Oklahoma State University. I work through the Center for Research in STEM Teaching and Learning, and I'm happy to be here live in our Emerging Technologies and Creativity Research Lab with my partner.
Hi everybody, I'm Turalani Asino, and I'm in the Educational Technology program, and I'm also the director for this lab at UC.
We're so excited. We also have with us today our featured speaker, Noah Newman, who's from the Community Collaborative for Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, which is COCOROS, and we'll all get really familiar with that acronym soon. And we also have partners in this project from the National Drought Mitigation, Deborah Bathke. I'm not sure if she's on yet. Hi, Deb, if you're there. I think most of you are familiar, but I just wanted to say a little bit about the Spotty Rain campaign. We're lucky enough to have funding from the National Science Foundation Advancements for Informal STEM Learning. And so this group is interested in lifelong STEM learning in multiple settings outside of schools and places like libraries. And our work focuses on how people find and use science resources related to drought. And one way that we do that is through our website, our online resource catalog. Having trouble, there we go. And I encourage you to check that out. In the process of this, we have some cool training videos from COCOROS and other science organizations and some apps and all kinds of community resources, and we'll touch on those more in webinar 4. In addition to the catalog where we've assembled a lot of resources for drought that citizen scientists might use, the large focus of this project is on community engagement and the unique role that you as librarians serve in your communities and knowing who and how this information might be more useful. We're very interested in how citizen science might be integrated in the library. I know a lot of you, hi Deb! I know a lot of you are in areas that have experienced drought in the past or currently, and some of you even where it's been flooding, and you might be asking why drought monitoring, and I think you're here because you know that drought has significant impacts on our community and that the environmental damage associated with it also has human and community impacts. One of the problems with drought is it's a slow onset disaster, and so we really need volunteers to help us monitor it. This is an example of what's termed the hydrological cycle, which just talks about how we as communities respond to drought, and sometimes in periods of rain we forget to plan and become apathetic, and then the slow nature of drought sort of catches up on us. So the work that you are thinking about doing in your libraries or encouraging people in your community to do is really important to overcoming that. So I'm happy to be introducing the Spotty Rain campaign to you. And after Noah talks today, we'll cover a little bit more about how to get that mini grant and get some rain gauges so you can get started. But here's our agenda. We're going to talk just briefly about what citizen science is, and then kick off and let Noah Newman from COCOROS show us how we can join and participate in this thousands of volunteers nationwide campaign that's been going on for 20 years. Citizen science, if you're not familiar with it, is a term coined just to basically talk about volunteer observations or public participation in science. And so our project really wants to think about all the ways that citizens might contribute to these networks, observation networks that we're talking about, but also use science-related drought information in their planning and community discussions. So our website supports tracking and catalogs a lot of the national and regional drought reports and forecasts. It provides, will cover ways that you can create your own local representations, and then a ton of resources for a lot of different audiences. I see people here talking about garden programs, and we think that's a really great connection to be making with this project. So if anytime through the conversation you have a question, go ahead and type it in chat and we'll let you know. And I'd like to turn the screen over to Noah Newman from the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network to teach us a little bit about his program.
No, I think you're a bit muted still.
Ah, yes, thank you. Just want to make sure you can see the Kokoraz homepage with my mouse moving around in a big circle here. That's the screen you're viewing right now. And now I've got my slides up. Everything look okay?
Looks good.
Okay, very good. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Noah Newman, and I am with the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, which is what Kokoraz stands for. Before I go any further, I do want to test out our polling feature here. So those of you that are on the webinar, we're going to pop up a quick poll just to make sure that you can see it properly and what role best describe what you do. And so if you can check at least one of these boxes, I know one of these boxes should be checked. And I think once we're done, Tudolini or Nicole will either close or even present the results of this poll.
I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And I share the results.
All right, we got some human beings.
Only 38% though.
Okay, very good. So thanks for that. You can close that on your screen, I believe, and I will go ahead and get started and talk about Kokoraz, again, standing for the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. So get on my right button here. So today's outline, I'm going to discuss a little bit about what Kokoraz is, what it takes to be a volunteer, very simple process on signing up, and then we'll get into a little bit of a brief training session on how to install the gauge and how to read the gauge, enter data, and a few other things, and then we'll finish off with just a couple of ideas of ways that you can do Kokoraz at your library, separate from just submitting rainfall data. So right off the bat, we'll start off with another poll just for the audience here. Have you ever participated in a citizen science project? And this can be anything from, there are hundreds of programs out there, from tracking butterflies. Many families throughout over the last hundred years have participated in the Great Wide Christmas Bird Count. So there are lots of different types of citizen science projects. Have you ever done any of them? Let's see our results. Okay, that's not bad. 50-50 about, so that's great to see. Some of you are then well seasoned in the idea, and a few of you are going to be newbies. That's great. Okay, so to begin, what is Kokoraz? I've already explained the acronym, but we are basically the citizen science project where people of all ages and backgrounds set up a rain gauge and submit their precipitation data to our website. Once you're trained, it's very easy. We use very simple tools. They're all manual instrumentation, so you're not using anything hooked up to a computer or automated sensor. And it's very easy to do. And once you're trained and set up, here's a shot of our website where you can enter the data and submit it for help by many. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But the data are just not for use by the National Weather Service and the Drought Mitigation Center. They're actually for you as well. Once you submit your data, you can see it on maps or in list format. You can look at the entire country. It's really amazing to see the patterns of precipitation from one day to the next. So how did we start? Back in 1997 in Fort Collins, Colorado, we had a fairly major flood. And the real bottom line, and this is something that we've all seen, is that it can rain across the street and not on you. And in this particular instance, it rained a whole year's worth on one side of town. And if you're looking at my mouse here, I'm circling where the airport was, and this was the only place that the National Weather Service were able to tell how much rain was falling. And these are inches of rainfall that we're looking at here. And so 2 inches is a lot of rain, but 14.5 inches on the other side of town is what causes a flood, of course. So what happened? All that flood water went into town. No one knew it was really coming. We unfortunately had 5 deaths, but something good did come out of it. We started a network of people that would put rain gauges in their backyards. And over time, we expanded, and we are now in all 50 states. We're also in Canada. We're in Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Virgin Islands. So wherever you are in the country, you can participate in COCORAS. So I mentioned that the data are used by many. And of course, the very top line there, the National Weather Service, but it's well beyond that. And we've got drought scientists that are looking at the data. We've got researchers, students, teachers, and of course, like I already mentioned, just the observers, you. Even if you're not an observer, you can go to our maps, you can see how much it rained in your area, and probably where it didn't rain right next to that area. So it's again, the variability of precipitation is the whole purpose of this project. So what does a COCORAS volunteer do? Well, basically it involves checking your rain gauge once a day, typically in the morning, and you check your gauge, you submit your data. We say that it takes an average of about 2 minutes a day, but oftentimes, oops, I apologize for not muting my phone back there. Oftentimes it takes probably closer to 30 seconds. And we'll go into the reason why it can take such little time each day, and it's something that you probably know already. Let's move on to the next question. So in your community, is flooding or drought a concern for the patrons or members that you meet and greet every day? Do your patrons or members of your community have an interest in weather or climate? So whether or not you might be in an agricultural community where flooding and drought might be a concern, but some places where it's more urban and less rural, you might just have members of your community who are just straight weather weenies. It's their hobby and they love tracking it, something like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll.
All right, so we've got a lot of concern for both flooding and drought, and yeah, many of them do have an interest in weather or climate. That's good. That's good to see. Okay, so we'll move on to and I just need to physically mute this phone. I can't believe I did not do that earlier. I apologize. And I'm just going to take it off the hook. Thank you guys very much. Sorry about that. Okay. Moving on. So signing up for Kokoraz. If you find yourself on our homepage, www.kokoraz.org, just look to that upper right-hand corner and you'll find the information to fill out. The only thing that I would say to libraries is to, if you're going to sign up, to please put the word library somewhere in the first or last name. Don't use your own name. Use the library's name. And then you can use your library email address when you're signing up as well. So where do you place your gauge? That is a fantastic question. Obviously, we don't want to be putting it underneath trees or against the building. That's really the obvious point to make. Sometimes different people, especially people participating in our network, they've got just a backyard, they've got trees. You know, we at the end just say, do your best. If your gauge can see the sky, you're doing something right. So that's the bottom line there. We don't want to discourage you to not sign up thinking that you don't have a good place. Find the best place at your location and we'll be happy with that. Places to not put your gauge. The real worst place to leave your gauge is inside the box. If you get one of these things, again, get it outside, point it towards the sky, and we will get some results. Obviously, certain things can't be avoided, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but here are a couple of photos and ideas of a way that you can install your gauge. So usually on an actual fence is not ideal because of the way the wind can blow up and over a fence line. So that is sometimes the last resort, but it's still better than nothing. But you can see a cheap $2 post from your local hardware store. You can build one out of 2x4s. This person buried a post in just a couple of inches of concrete in a bucket, and then they made a nice little decorative thing out of it. And this is a great idea for a library where if it needs to be moved temporarily for whatever reason, you can do so in a case like that. There are a few concerns out there, especially when you put a rain gauge in a public place, whether it's vandalism is one issue. You know, the main advice that I give to prevent vandalism, number one, is to actually kind of celebrate the gauge. Don't try to hide it, but more put up a sign and say, this is a community gauge. The data are going to the National Weather Service. It's for you, the community. And the other advice that I give to fight vandalism is to possibly put an American flag sticker on the outside of your gauge. People tend to have a harder time taking a baseball bat to something with an American flag on it. So that's typically a good idea. You do want to be aware of sprinklers though. So if you've got sprinklers at your location, you do need to have it, you know, probably 5 feet off the ground is a typical recommendation. But as I saw with some librarians that were commenting, they've got a garden club, things like that. Most of the time, if you've got a garden, you very likely have got like a drip system or something like that. So a garden is a great place to put the rain gauge. The last concern, I kind of added this, is not so much about installing the gauge, but weekends and holidays. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but basically the bottom line is there is not a concern with that. If you're gone for a day, you can submit what's called a multi-day accumulation report, but there's also times when life just gets in the way and you don't remember to check it, and that's quite all right too. It's not the end of the world if you are not submitting data each and every day. Okay, let's move on to another poll question. What do you think? Is there a location at your library where a rain gauge could be placed?
Close that one, maybe.
We'll pop up the poll in a second here. And it's still okay if you don't know. If you have some thinking to do, you might need to get permission from a groundskeeper or something like that. So it's understandable if the answer is I don't know. And my feelings won't be hurt if the answer is just straight no.
All right.
All right.
And the poll. Check the results.
Hey, all right, that's great. And again, the real bottom line is to do your best. So if you don't feel you have an ideal location, there's potentially a place where we could work with you to work out a situation where it can work for you too. Okay, moving forward. Reading your gauge. So we're going to get into just a very brief training session here, and by the time we're finished, everyone here will be experts and trained and certified to the same degree as a NASA astronaut when it comes to measuring precipitation. So the gauge, I'm holding it up here so you can see it's lightweight and easy to use. It's got basically three parts. Besides the mounting bracket, you've got the outer cylinder, you've got the funnel, and you've got a measuring tube. And so I'll describe what's going on here. Basically, the funnel is going to be, of course, a wider area than the measuring inner tube. And so as the rain falls into this wider area and squeezes it into the inner tube, it basically stretches out that measurement to the nearest hundredth of an inch. So you can see I've separated the inner tube and the rain gauge, the outer cylinder. And if we've got 1 inch of water that falls into this outer cylinder, which is the same size as, of course, the funnel, it would fill that inner tube all the way to the top where it says 1.00, 1 inch. So there's 100 tick marks up and down this entire thing here. And so we can see if we had a half of an inch, it would come up to the 0.50. If we had 3/4 of an inch, it'd be about right here at 0.75. And so that's the way the rain gauge works. And looking back up at the webcam here, you can see, of course, that it all comes put together. And so that first inch, as it falls into the funnel and flows into the inner tube, gets automatically measured right off the bat. So the Spotty Rain campaign, we're a little bit focused on drought, and of course, for most people, your most common observation each and every day will be 0. It did not rain yesterday. I'm checking my gauge. There's nothing in there. And some people will ask, well, is 0 good data? And our quick answer is yes, 0 is good data. We want to know if it did not rain. If you do not report, we don't know if it rained or not at your area. So a 0 is a confirmation for us that it did not rain, and that's really important. So 0 is and I mentioned earlier on that the average observation takes maybe 2 minutes or so. Well, most of the time it's actually 0, and it took you about 30 seconds. You check your gauge, you can submit your data even on an app, and you're done for the day. Next most common report is a trace. You hear on the news, they say, oh, we got a trace of precipitation yesterday. Well, what does that mean? It means that it rained, but it's just there wasn't enough in the gauge to actually reach that first 1/100th of an inch line here. Those droplets do not need to actually land in your gauge to count for a trace. If you're at your site and you see a raindrop hit the concrete, it counts. You got a trace for the day. You've got more than 0. Now we'll travel very quickly back to middle school to remember the fun term about the meniscus. And what's going on here is that surface tension, basically water droplets like to kind of stick to the outside of the measuring tube, and gravity will pull the bottom part of it down, creating a curved shape. And if we remember correctly, the idea is to look at the bottom of the meniscus and measure to the bottom of the meniscus here. Now this is a funny instance, and we should almost not even use this photo because the bottom of the meniscus here looks to be between 39 and 40/100ths. And we can't report something between hundredths of an inch. So once in a while, you are forced to choose between one or the other. I tend to round up to, I would call this 0.40 because you very likely have little droplets that are still stuck to the inner tube that didn't even flow all the way down into the water here. So in this case, I'd call it 40, but clearly not 41, even though the top of the water comes almost to 42 hundredths here. Or actually, yeah. So basically, let's be accurate, but do not round, which leads me, or I mean, I said to round up to the to the nearest hundredth, but that leads me to the next saying, please do not round. We want to be accurate to the nearest hundredth of an inch. We do have some volunteers that will look at their inner tube and go, oh, I got about a half of an inch, and they'll enter 0.5, and that's what we specifically do not want. We want it to the nearest hundredth of an inch, please. A quick word about decimals. That's probably one of the most common errors that we see each and every day. Someone will intend to report 4/10 of an inch or 40 hundredths, and they'll miss a decimal and they'll report 4 inches of rain. And that sticks out like a sore thumb on the map, and we can usually see it and correct it quite quickly. But be careful as you're entering your data because decimal errors can occur. When do we take our observation? Well, ideally you want to take it every day at 7 o'clock, but that's of course not expected by each and every individual in our network. We've got 20,000 people who all volunteer, and we want to make this work for you. So if you can choose a morning time that works for you and do your best to stay consistent, really any time between 4:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. is preferable, and your dot will show up on the map. Now, I will say that we've got some volunteers that prefer the midnight to midnight schedule. They know that it rained on this day and that ends at midnight, and so they prefer to submit their data at midnight. That's fine, but if you submit your data, if you read your gauge at midnight and submit that data, it's still accepted. They are still valuable, but it just won't show up on our map. You won't be able to see your dot on the map. And so if you want to be comparing your data to everyone else, it's recommended to do that morning time observation. Now, I will add one last caveat to this, and I kind of jumbled my words with observing and submitting your data. We want you to observe your gauge in the morning, but you can submit your data anytime. Some people write it down each day, and at the end of the week, they come in and they enter their data for the whole week, each daily data point. So it's okay to submit your data whenever you want, but we prefer that you read your gauge sometime in the morning. The last piece here, sometimes the follow-up question, well, what if my measuring inner tube goes all the way to the inch and then starts overflowing into the entire rest of the gauge? This gauge can actually hold a little over 11 inches of rainfall. And so in a case where you have more than an inch, you can see the instructions are clearly you pour that first inch out, you write it down, especially if you've got multiple inches like this. If you live in Texas or Florida or somewhere where hurricanes are more prevalent, you can get 8, 9, 10 inches in a day. We recommend that you write it down each time that you refill that inner tube. You write it down, you pour it out, and you keep doing that until you are at the end, and then you'll have your grand total. Okay, poll time again. Now, that was a quick training session, so I understand as much as I'm saying you are now trained and certified, understanding you'd need a little practice still. Is this something that you think you could do? And as we ask this question, think about the fact that maybe you're not checking the gauge every day. Could you show one of your coworkers how to do this? So that way it could be done at your library, not just solely by you, but you and your cohorts.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
100%. Oh, you guys make me so happy. That's awesome. Great to hear. Okay, so let's move forward. Data entry. This is really easy. Once you're logged in, you typically land right on your data entry page automatically. If not, you click on My Data at the top of the page, and then you'll see your data entry page. The only required field is going to be this box right here. This is it. It's going to automatically fill in the correct day and your default time that you select when you sign up. But you can change this time too. If you read your gauge at a different time, you can change that. And all you do is fill in how much you got. We do appreciate it if you tell us a little story, whether you want to say that it rained all night long, or this amount fell in 30 minutes, or anything you want to do. Some people write the temperature down. Some people write their cloud cover. They use it as a personal weather diary. And that way you can look back at your own data and see when you had that extra fun event. But again, very simple. You land on your data entry page. It defaults to 0. You hit submit. You're done. We do have other things that you can measure besides just rainfall. Hail is one of them. I had a slide earlier that showed the hail pad. It's just basically a piece of styrofoam covered with tinfoil, but you affix it to a location next to your gauge, and after a hailstorm, it will leave permanent indentations where we can count the number, we can look at the different sizes, and we can actually even see the angle of impact if the wind was involved. This is my colleague holding the largest hailstone to ever fall in the United States. It was in Vivian, South Dakota, clearly about the size of a volleyball. So that was a whopper.
No, there's
A few questions.
Yes.
one of them is, so for monitoring, if they're not at the libraries at 7:30, how do you work around that? No one will be at the library too early or too late to observe.
Sure, and that's fine. So again, when you're signing up, you can choose your default time. Again, that's what will just automatically fill in on your data entry page. You can choose whatever is going to work for you. If it's 9 o'clock, that's fine. If it's 10 o'clock, that's okay. Your data, again, will still be valuable. If it's after 9:30, your dot will not show up on the map. That's because we don't want to compare your data to other people who measured 2 hours earlier. But whatever time works for you works perfectly for us. The best thing that you can do is to stay consistent, though, and to try to check it at the same time every day. But whatever works for you, it does not have to be 7 a.m.
There was another question here, a point of clarification. If you had a big storm in the afternoon, would you go back and read the gauge again?
Right. And so the idea is to only check it once per day, and you're checking it in the morning. So it's 4 p.m. and it's raining cats and dogs, and it's fun to see how much you got, but you actually don't want to officially check it and officially empty and report it until the next morning. So it would be my 7 a.m. reading that covers the previous 24 hours from 7 a.m. yesterday, if 7 o'clock is your time. So it's fun to watch those storms, and it's fun to see how much you get, but you want to wait until the next morning to actually make that observation. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, I think we're good. So I talked about observing hail. It's a lot of fun just with that piece of styrofoam covered with tinfoil, and that's a fun little craft idea that can just even be made at the library. When it comes to entering data for hail or for other things that we offer, they're all on the left side of your data entry page. So once you've clicked on My Data and you're on your data entry page, there are other observations that you can do. Hail is one of them. Significant weather is another one of those, and I'll briefly say that based on that question before. If it's raining cats and dogs at 4 p.m. and you want the National Weather Service to know about it, you can submit a real-time report, being this significant weather report, and you can tell them how much you got in that rainstorm. But the next morning, you would still want to submit your 24-hour total that you ended up with by the next morning. Here's where that multi-day accumulation can be submitted. So if you're gone for weekends, holidays, or just you missed a day, you can submit a multi-day accumulation report. There's a few other things, and in another webinar or two, we're going to get into what's now called condition monitoring reports, which are about reporting your drought impacts. The neat thing about both hail and significant weather is that those are real-time reports, and so the moment you hit submit on your computer, it is routed immediately to your local National Weather Service office. And there have been documented cases where COCORA's observers submitted significant weather reports that prompted the National Weather Service to issue flash flood warnings that saved lives downstream. So you can be a part of something in your community where you're actually helping to save lives. Measuring snow. Snow is good. That is a quote by the founder of COCORA's, Nolan Duskin, and he is a lover of snow. And if you live in Colorado, I think you have to be. I'm not going to go into the full training of measuring snow, but I will say that on any of our pages on the COCORA's webpage, if you go to YouTube, in the upper right corner, we've got training animations and PowerPoints that go into snowfall. These are all optional, so during the winter time, if you don't feel comfortable and don't want to measure snow, you do not have to. It's all optional. But I will say very briefly, the basic things that we do with measuring snow is, of course, yes, we love to measure the depth. We all want to know how deep it was. I get into work, ooh, I had 8 inches at my house. How much did you have? But the thing that, as scientists, what we want to know is actually how much water is in that snow. So whether you take your gauge that received snow, and I would say the recommendation is to take your funnel and inner tube and bring them inside and just let the outer cylinder collect the snow. And you bring this inside, you let it melt, and you pour that melted amount into your inner tube, and you figure out how much water is in that snow. You can also collect a core sample of the snow that is on the ground and melt it and report that liquid amount as well. So again, on our website, we've got training materials that deal with snow. We've got videos, we've got animations, we've got resources, and of course, human beings. We've got, besides me, we've got coordinators in each and every state that can be there to help you out with these measurements. Okay, poll time. Another question. This somewhat repeats a little bit of what we asked before, but with additional practice and training, would you be able to show your staff and others how to measure at least rainfall? And again, we're not necessarily getting into snow right here, but would you be able to show people how to do it? How to go to our website, get registered? I'm anticipating 100%.
It's a bright bunch we have here. So exciting.
I'm going to select no just to be an outlier.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go ahead and enter poll.
We just want to hang out with you more, Noah.
All right. Very good. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. But all that being said, again, we've got resources and human beings who are here to help you get signed up, get your gauge installed, entering data, reading your gauge, whatever it is, we are definitely here to help. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. I want to talk about a couple of ideas that can be done at the library. This is a fun When you have an outside activity, perhaps, this is something that we have built, and it's pretty easy to make. Basically, it's like a carnival game with 2 rain gauges and 2 targets where 2 kids here are using squirt guns, and you give them about 10 seconds, and then you cut them off, and you pull the gauges, and now they've got to read them to see who wins. And when I do this with teachers, of course, they love it because the kids are walking away going, "Oh, I had 1800s. How much did you have?" And they almost don't realize that they're using decimals and learning how to read an instrument, and they're having fun doing it. Now, at a library, you can do something slightly more basic. Instead of squirt guns and this target, we've done it where we set up 2 gauges and hold a race with wringing out a cloud. So basically, we've got a bucket with some sponges, and the kids have to, fill up the sponge and squeeze it into the gauge. And again, you give them about 10 or 20 seconds of a race to squeeze out the sponge and get as much rain as they can in there. And then, of course, again, they've got to read their gauge to see who wins. That's a lot of fun and a good community, a way to involve the community if you have like an outdoor event. The last thing I'll show you, and if any of you were at the Colorado Library Conference, you saw this as well. I talked earlier about the hail pads with the piece of styrofoam covered with tinfoil. Well, we've got a program where if you want to order a used hail pad, one that's already been damaged, in fact, more than one, you'd holler at us, we could send you a handful. And this is a great idea for a craft idea where kids or adults can choose a hail pad of their liking, cut it out, get a little backing, and frame it up. And we've got Nature Makes Art here. This is a real hail pad damaged by real hail and hanging up in the office as we speak. That's a fun way to get the community involved, talking about weather and climate. And again, even if it's not something that you do at the library or even the patrons sign up to do, this is a resource for you that maybe a patron's got a question on just, what's the average rainfall in your area? Well, now that you know us, me here at Kokoraz, I'm a quick email away. I could very likely get you in touch with an official at the National Weather Service in your state, or potentially even the state climatologist. We've got top scientists at our fingertips who are eager to help the community, and reaching out through the library would be fantastic. So any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, complaints? Is there anything at all as I finish this off and showing the easy steps? Of course, just signing up on our website, getting the proper rain gauge. You can review the slideshows, set it up at a good location, and you're ready to go. We say here at Kokoraz, we are cuckoo for Kokoraz. So, Nicole Tudolini, do we have any questions at all that we could?
I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Maybe what people are mulling that through and have some questions could be switching over to the.
Yes, but the webinar will be archived and we'll have it on our website, so you can come back and review it again. And the emails will be there, so you can reach out to Noah or to any of us post this webinar. So, but I'm gonna. Yeah,
and so if you know another library or colleague who's interested, it's not too late to participate in this webinar series in Kokoraz, and also in the mini grant series we're going to talk about in a second. So you can join Kokoraz at any time and pick up in the series at any time. So please spread the word if you think this is something your friends would be interested in.
Yay, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate the nice feedback, too. Thank you so much.
I know a lot of you are drawn here today by this mini grant opportunity. I hope that you're leaving Noah's presentation understanding that it's easy. It's super easy to, and next time we'll be talking about why it's so important both to drought monitoring, but to just weather planning and emergency management in general. We are so glad that the National Science Foundation has funded this project to try to increase the number of CoCoRaHS volunteers and drought-related programs in general in the library. We're really targeted here on small libraries or libraries serving rural populations. Our partners are in Colorado, CoCoRaHS, and the National Drought Mitigation Center in Nebraska, and we're here in Oklahoma. But this opportunity is available to all libraries in the Great Plains, so a number of you in North Dakota, Texas, and a lot of librarians have questions about what is required, and I think today we have some ideas about how you might host a rain gauge in your library, or maybe some ideas about how you could interest other people in your community in being volunteers. It's really neat when a set of people start to share their data together. You really get a picture of the variability just across town or even in one county. So we think you know your library best and the programs and people that might be interested, but we encourage you to find community partners or stakeholders and to host a program or expose your patrons to this idea. It could be in the library or a community event outside the library, like a county fair or fall festival. And you are probably familiar with our website. Has a little bit more information that if you enjoy this webinar series, and we hope you come back and listen to the other four. We have an opportunity to send you some rain gauges, I believe 3 per library, so you have 1 to put in your location and 2 to give away at an event, and a little bit of money, a stipend or mini grant for your efforts. And then we are interested in the kinds of connections you make there, and we'll have another series of funding for librarians interested in helping us come up with some program ideas and some plug-and-play materials that we could use to interest people, future libraries and education facilities. So there's 3, it's easy to be a CoCoRaHS volunteer, and we hope it's easy for you also to get not just the knowledge about how to do the program, but the physical resources. So please join us again virtually or recorded in every 2 weeks for the next 2, for October and November. Think about who is a partner who would be interested in this idea, and plan a program. And that can happen in the spring. I think is a great idea. I saw some people talking about connecting with the Fairy Tales library theme. I think you guys are so creative, and I can't wait to see how you connect these ideas. So if you're interested in the mini grant, a really important step today will be to give us your feedback. I'd love everyone's feedback. Here's a tiny URL to a short survey. Should take you less than 5 minutes. It asks you a little bit about today, the success of today's webinar, and a few questions about drought and about your programming interests so that we can prepare for the upcoming webinars, and we'll also send that out to you in an email. If you could take 5 minutes to fill that out, that would be great, and then it would be a record of your participation moving forward. Thank you so much for coming. We're at 12:48, and so I love that we are a quick lunchtime series. I hope that you found that it was engaging. I appreciated all your polling answers. We have some social media that I encourage you to follow us on, our Facebook and our Twitter. We share and post a lot of weather and drought-related information. We also, as our network, or as you guys get interested in this project grows, we're recognizing the need to streamline our communication and make sure that we're not missing people who are interested. And so I also encourage you to join the listserv. If you fill out that survey for us, it'll take you right to where you can sign up at the end of the day, and we can also manually sign you up. So if there are any questions about the mini grants or the upcoming webinar series or this project, I'd love to have you post them in the chat section. There's a few questions I anticipated. So one is, what if I'm a suburban or urban library? And I'd like you to think creatively about how you might engage with, if you're interested in receiving the mini grant, creative ways in which you might engage with rural audiences. So I know here in Stillwater, we are a suburban area, but we have a rural population that we serve. Everyone in the county can get library cards, and there may be a way to connect with that audience even though you're in a suburban place. Or if you're an urban or suburban library or a larger library, is there some way perhaps that you could connect and partner with a small library or lead a library network in your state that included rural and small libraries as observer stations? So let's not worry about if you're suburban and urban, and maybe figure out, if you're interested, ways that we can connect you with that rural audience. And I'll have Noah maybe speak to this, that those observations in limited population areas are really, really important and part of the reason we're focusing here. Also, if you're not in the Great Plains, so I know we've got Indiana and Illinois and New Jersey, we don't want you to leave disappointed or feeling like there isn't support for you. So I know that Noah has said, like, many times this webinar, let's reach out to our state and regional COCORAS representatives. They're oftentimes happy to come and help you put on a program, or may have local resources to get you the rain gauge. Do you want to add to that, Noah?
Yeah, absolutely, especially when it comes to a library. Each state is eager to get more observers, and so each particular state coordinator, I'm sure, would be happy to work with you and to try to get your library a gauge at no cost. So that's if you're just personally interested and want to do it in your own backyard, we do want you to buy it yourself. But as a library, as an institution, we can very likely find you a donated rain gauge no matter where you are.
I love this comment from CL about some suburban libraries are small. That we are learning about libraries and how they differ across states, and there is that saying in Arcel that every small library is different, and we recognize that, so thank you for pointing that out, CL, and I totally would love to have you guys participating. I think there was another question about would school libraries be eligible, and I think the answer to that is yes, and I think that school and public library partnerships are great. We shared a link to our classroom section on the webpage. So here at the OSU and our Center for Research in STEM Teaching and Learning, we're doing a lot of professional development also with science teachers using COCORAS. So this idea that it meets a lot of the school science standards of collecting and using real weather data, and the science practices that are emphasized by the NGSS. So the school library is a great place to have a gauge, and kids often really get excited about and invested in being observers, readers, and recorders. Oh, there's another question. What is the time frame for the library to host a program? I think we're generally saying 6 months, so if you wanted to do it in the spring or the beginning of the summer when kids are getting out of school, I think that's a great idea. Again, I think we want to work with you, and we recognize that sometimes libraries are planning 3 or 6 months in advance for their programs, and so that if you're not thinking about doing it this winter, I think the spring or summer would be great. All right.
I saw one other real quick, just confirming that this webinar will be archived and be able to be viewed again. And I also want to, I provided my slides in PDF, so hopefully those can be provided on the Spotty Rain website as well.
Yes, so we'll put the webinar and the slides and the link to the survey, so if anyone wants to watch and enter also, they can do that.
And there's a live link in the chat window to sign up for the listserv. So if you can click on that and sign up, that'll be great. That way we'll just send information to everybody on the list, and you can always unsubscribe at any point if you think we're sending you too much information, which I don't think is going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
All right, well, I think that concludes our first webinar in the series of 4. It is easy. Please take a second to fill out the webinar survey. You can see the live link in the chat, or we'll send you an email shortly with that information. Have a great day, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.